What's up? I'm the Heartache Connoisseur. I'm going to talk to you about growing up, development through the lifespan, the emotional pathway that people seem to take. I pretty much spend all day sitting in my office as a psychiatrist listening to people process their feelings about how life's not turning out like they thought it was going to. And ultimately helping them accept that and let go of resentments and bitterness associated with the ways that they feel gypped. That's what I do for a living. And if they're not ready to have those discussions, oftentimes they'll come in wanting medication. And so you do that. And sometimes that helps, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes there's a real chemical disorder, and it's not existential. And usually it's a little bit of all of the above. So there's no way to do this job and stick strictly to the medications and do it completely and fully well, in my opinion. You have to address the people's beliefs about themselves and the world around them. You've got to address the lies that they tell themselves and help them get to the truth of the situation. And let me tell you, there are truths. There are truths that define this place, that govern us, whether we like it or not, whether we know them or not. People hit up against the same walls over and over again. I tell people, the Fight Club quote, you're not a unique snowflake. You're not. Your struggles are common most of the time, predictable even, boring after a while, truthfully. I love you, but it's the same thing over and over again. Now, let me elaborate on that. Your teenage years, you want to be part of the crowd. By far, your social network is the most important thing to you, how you're perceived by your peers, members of the opposite sex, etc. You have your Snap Facebook, chatograms, and you do that thing. And you'd much rather be rejected by, or you'd much rather have your parents think ill of you than your peer group, perhaps. Or maybe you'd much rather flunk a class than be embarrassed socially. Normal. You go to college, you get in your 20s, you begin to let go of some of that. You find your group, you realize that, acceptance by everybody is impossible. You might still try, but you begin to narrow that down a little bit, and you start to think about, well, what am I here for? What am I going to do with my life? What am I going to pursue to make my mark? What am I going to find that's unique about me and use that to make a living? Or am I just going to get a job and just be cool with that? Am I going to try to avoid working as long as possible? You kind of start to ask yourself, what am I going to do with myself a little bit? I hope you're asking yourself that. And that's a normal thing. You go to college, you try out different things, you try out different classes and things like that, and you begin to get a sense of what you're here for. And maybe you graduate from college, and soon after you get married, or you've paired off somehow or some way with somebody, and it's forming a kind of a more long-term bond, and you're experimenting with what it means to be in a committed relationship. And that's a normal process. And it works. It keeps you going for a long time because there's a lot of school, and there's a lot of goals, and there's a lot of tangible, attainable things set before you. I can get a job. I can find a mate. I can make a living that is capable of supporting me and possibly a family. And you see those things, so there's something very clear on the horizon to work for. And that gets you out of bed every morning. Your goals, your fears of failure, your desire to be accepted. And there's a whole lot of other things that motivate us too, in my opinion, below the surface. But those are the things we know, and those are the stories we tell ourselves. And we tell ourselves something like this: if I do this right, if I get out of bed every morning, go to work, do a good job, get promoted, marry a nice person, that it's going to go okay for me. I'm going to be fine, right? I'm going to get promoted. I'll get a good job. I'll make the money I want. I'll get where I'm going eventually. I'll get married to this person. They would never betray me, right? They wouldn't do that. I wouldn't do that to them. And you go into it kind of naively thinking, I'm going to make this work. I'm not going to be like all the other people, and I'm going to have kids, and I'm going to do that right, and I'm not going to screw up in the same way that my parents did. You're going to feel really self-righteous about that, and talk to your friends and your mate about your parenting and how you're doing this right and that right, and secretly you're terrified because you have no idea what you're doing, but you don't tell anybody how afraid you are. You just pretend you know what you're doing. It's a good strategy. You fit in. You accomplish essentially what you've set out to accomplish, let's say. I'm not talking about the people who get totally derailed, let's say, with crimes or drugs or so severe of personality problems that they aren't able to get along and play well in the sandbox. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about your average, ordinary, middle of the bell curve, folks. And so you get in your 30s now, right? You're still pretty young. Maybe you're still cute. Maybe you're still buff. But it's starting to slip, and you know it. And you've got maybe where you're wanting to go with work, sort of. Or at least you've been in it long enough to know exactly what you're doing and where you could be, maybe dissatisfied with where you're not. But you begin to know what you're up to there. You've met some of those career goals, perhaps. You've got your graduate degree, you've got your PhD, your master's or your bachelor's or your tradesman, whatever, and you're doing all right and you're humming along. A little dissatisfaction creeps in because you're like, well, is this it? Is this what I'm going to do forever now? This? I didn't think it was going to be like this. I thought it would just get better and better. I didn't know that a good portion of this was going to suck every day. Now let's say you've been married 10 years and you've got a kid or 2 or 3, and that was all going to be awesome. You've always wanted to be a father or a mother. You've told yourself that. Now you have these children, and you're beginning to notice these ambivalent feelings, like these kids aren't making me as happy as I thought they would, and I'm not sure I should admit that. What does that mean about me if I'm not absolutely 100% in love with my children all the time? And what does it mean about me that I'm not happy in my work? What does it mean about me that fitting in isn't doing it for me anymore? Doing the right thing isn't getting me what I thought. I thought this universe and I had a deal that if I just did the right thing, if I played it straight, played by the rules, or at least didn't get caught, that it was going to be fine. But you're in pain. You're in emotional pain because it's not how you thought it was gonna be. Your partner doesn't behave in the way that you would like them to. You don't behave in the way that you would like to, or that your partner would like you to. Your kids don't behave in the way you would like them to. Your boss doesn't. Your friends don't. Nobody cares what you want them to do, and they won't listen to you. And it's eye-opening and shocking and frustrating and maddening that you can't control everything and everybody. It's a shock. It's a slap in the face is what it is. And that often begins to precipitate crises, and we look for ways to fix it. Play more golf, drink more, watch more stuff, binge on things. Maybe we begin to look around. Maybe we have an affair. Maybe we strike up inappropriate relationships at work or online. We begin secret keeping. And we're just trying to feel good. I mean, I don't blame anybody. I mean, we're trying to be okay. What we don't realize is that we've all been chasing a feeling all along. And the things that we thought were going to give us the feeling we wanted or hoped for haven't. And so we frantically look for a substitute. We look for anything we can find that'll allow us to feel okay, even for a short amount of time, and we start making all these deals with the devil. I don't actually have a drinking problem. Looking at pornography on a daily basis isn't affecting my relationships. Everybody does it. Gossiping with my friends around the happy hour table, my girlfriends, about how much our husbands suck. That's what everybody does. I'm just venting. It couldn't possibly be injecting acid into my marriage, listening to what people say about my situation and accepting it as truth. What the hell do they know anyway? You're all equally miserable. It's the blind leading the blind. That's what peer relationships often are. Well, I've got this friend that'll be honest with me, and they tell me what I need to hear. No, they don't. Because the risk of losing your social standing is often a much greater fear than it's if I tell this person the truth, they're going to reject me in some way. That's what it is. Now, sometimes we're honest. I'm not saying we're never honest with our friends, but oftentimes there's this undercurrent of, I've got to take their side. I'm going to be on their side, not considering fully that there's another side to the story. And these things all begin to inform us, and we're watching our media, and we're watching the internet, and we're reading, and all of the cultural messages are, you should be happy. You deserve to be happy. If you're not happy, make yourself happy. Take matters into your own hands. Oh, and by the way, if you buy this thing, it's going to make you happy, or that thing, or if you travel here, or if you smoke this, or if you drink that, or if you shoot this, or if you imbibe that or eat this. There's no end to people playing on your desire for a spike in your dopamine. That's what it is. Even the news, it's like it's a way to get people to forget about their own pain and lock in on somebody that they perceive that agrees with them, so as to feel a little bit validated. It's a little bit of a buzz, even though it makes us angry. If we're honest, we like being angry a little bit. We like feeling self-righteous, essentially. It's a quid pro quo. It's cash under the table. Well, I'm just staying informed. Yeah, but you're pissed off all the time, and all you can talk about is your political stance. You're not interesting. I know exactly what you're going to say about everything. That's what I mean. We become these automatons in a way. And then when you begin to become aware of that, that's troubling. That produces some deep existential questions. And if you get unhappy enough, you decide to make some real change, which can be a good thing. We often misidentify the villain. If I leave my spouse, then everything will be okay. And again, I'm not talking about abusive, addicted, sick, illegal, terrible, awful relationships. That's obvious to all involved that this is not love by any stretch of the imagination. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the problems that many people have and aren't willing to solve with their mate. We look at our mate and we think, you're the problem. And if I leave you, things are going to be okay. Or we look at our job. If I got this promotion, or if I made more money, or if I picked a new job, or if we moved to a different city, that's going to make it okay. And so sometimes we take some drastic measures. I've seen many people do these kinds of things. I've seen people quit their jobs and open up food trucks. I've seen people move to other countries and start living on far less money. Quit corporate jobs and start making soap in their basement, things like that. I mean, I see this. And I can't tell you that it's necessarily a bad thing. I really don't necessarily think that it is. Because really what we're trying to do is we're trying to learn and we're trying to grow. And we think we're going somewhere, but where we're going is deeper within. And you don't have to have any particular job or title to do that. We get it backwards. We look outward. We never look inward. We've all got this gun, this like anger gun, bitterness gun. We can point it out We can point it in. We can point it up. We do a lot of that. We do a lot of this secretly, but the only thing that's safe for us to say and really truly admit outwardly is out. It's your fault. It's your fault I'm not better than I am. I'm gypped. Everybody's gypped. Everybody's got a laundry list of why their suffering is worse than somebody else's. And it's all true. That's what makes this difficult to wrestle with, is that your laundry list is true. Your parents did mess with your head in some ways that have had long-standing consequences for you. You have been cheated on and heartbroken. You've been passed over for the raise and the promotion unjustly. Yes, you have. You've been discriminated against for one reason or another. So, what does that mean? It means justice isn't being done to you in your mind. That life is not fair. We tell our kids life's not fair, but we don't internalize what that means and really live from a place of believing that fairness is not the ultimate good. So you make these changes, and you look back after you make them sometimes. Let's say you get divorced, for example, and you're like, well, I had this whole identity built around, being this thing. This, I'm a married parent, educated, fan of this team, liker of this food and this liquor, enjoyer of this type of movie and this type of book, with friends who also like this. And this becomes who we think we are. We become this list of opinions and facts about ourselves. And it just lets us down. And so when your world gets shaken and the major pillars of your identity are come toppling down, you have to rewrite your story in a way that makes sense, and that's hard to do. I mean, you're on page 800 here of a 5,000 or a 2,000 page novel, and now you got to turn back to page 50 and start making sense out of things and changing it and editing it and coming to terms with the things that you wrote down thinking were true that actually are not true. What does that mean about you? That the things you believed and based your whole life on aren't true. It means you're human. Take heart. You're stronger than you think you are. But you got to stop being afraid. That's the key. Well, you have a crisis, and something gets everybody. It's the divorce. It's a betrayal. It's an infidelity. It's the loss of a job. It's a dying parent. It's a sick child, a child with special needs. It's sickness of your own self. It's a mental illness. It's an addiction. Something comes along and chops us off at the knees. And it usually happens in midlife. Maybe in our late 30s, 40s. It happens a little sooner for women, I feel. I think that a lot of times women who are exposed to lots of child rearing and maybe feel pressured to balance a career in addition, that they get this wrung out of them a little sooner. Men are able to postpone this sometimes by, I think, probably, doubling down on their career. And, most of their wives are codependent enough to not take drastic enough measures to make them change. Basically, if you really want your husband to play less golf or go on less long bike rides or whatever without you, you have to be willing to set boundaries with him. And if you're not willing to do that, then it's your own damn fault, or it's everybody's fault. Or it's nobody's fault, right? It doesn't matter. See, this is what we do. It's like, the point is, we're in this dynamic, we're in this dance with somebody, and it's a different story, but you find out your worldview isn't correct, and you've got to correct it. And you find out that Society's messages to you have not been accurate. They have not had your best interests at heart. Nobody's noticed that you're doing a fabulous job at work. You're stuck taking pride in your own good work for no more money than you earned last year or less. Well, that sucks. It stops sucking when you can truly love your work, when you can truly be grateful for the situation you find yourself in. But this crisis happens, and it chops everybody down, and you find yourself low. You find yourself disenfranchised, disillusioned, trying to make sense out of the way things are. And you got to rebuild. Wise people rebuild, and they learn. And eventually, wise people don't think of these things as failures at all. They think of them as just steps on a pathway to maturity. People not able to do that are not wise, and they become bitter, and they become angry, ever more so. They become ever more skilled at covering their bitterness, shrouding it with caustic humor and political hatred, bigotry, blame. Or you just stay a child. You just stay Peter Pan. You get divorced and you just chase women for years till you can't keep it up anymore. You come to me for Viagra. You go back, you revert to this adolescent state, and you say, well, okay, fine. I can't win. I'm just going to be a hedonist. And that after a while becomes comical. It becomes pathetic, typically, is how that looks towards the end of one's life. So you have a choice there out in the middle. You have a crisis, and you can get healthy and wise, or you can become old and bitter or pathetic. And often there's a reconciling or a reconnoitering or a wrestling with your spiritual beliefs around this time. Maybe you've been in a church setting for years, sort of a nominal participant. You say you go. You say that's what you believe. You take your kids to Sunday school and such. But it's not something that informs your day-to-day decision making. Or maybe you're atheistic or agnostic, and you've prided yourself on that. I'm a materialist. This is how I see the world. Isn't it obvious? Only a fool would believe in something they can't see. But then you find yourself in despair, and you cry out, and there's something in your soul that longs to be seen and known. And maybe you even accidentally pray. And you have to admit to yourself that maybe you just don't know. Or maybe you feel something touch you in a way that moves you. Maybe you begin to see something deeper in the world around you or in your children who now suddenly are so romantic and sentimental and deeply, powerfully moving to you because your nuclear family is now torn apart. And so when you look at that child, it's a reminder. You see your legacy there. You see your failure. You see your greatest success all wrapped up into one. And suddenly the theories of evolution don't explain what you're feeling. They don't. They don't explain the art you're drawn to anymore. They don't explain your hunger for meaning. Because it's meaningless, right? You've told yourself it's all meaningless. It doesn't matter. It's all arbitrary. These are just the opinions of someone else that I've been adhering to. You've come to realize that the things that you're believing about yourself are somebody else's ideals. They're not your own. They're scientific ideals. They're cultural ideals. They're historical ideals. Well, what are my own, really? What do I really believe? And you got to ask yourself that, and you do if you're paying attention to how the world's going down around you. And that's great. It's freeing, because every time you let go of one of these things, these worldviews or these belief systems or whatever, it's painful. It's like having duct tape ripped off your chest if you're a hairy guy, you know, or having yourself waxed. But it's at the end, you're like, oh, I'm free. I really am. Like, I'm free of that thing. I'm no longer a slave to that way of thinking or that way of doing business. I'm different. You found out more of what you're capable of, what you're capable of enduring and figuring out and making it through and surviving. And that's a lovely thing. So was it the worst thing that ever happened to you? Or was it the best thing that ever happened to you? And those lines get blurry and you don't know anymore. And if you're paying attention, you realize they were just steps. It couldn't have happened any other way, because I was too bullheaded to make any different decisions than I did. I didn't know what I needed to know to do it this way. I thought I did. I may have been able to get the answers right on a true-false test, but I didn't know them deeply. It's like the difference between looking at golf on TV and you see the golf swing and you know that it's beautiful and perfect, and that's going to result. You know what a good golf swing looks like, but your whole life you've been stepping up to the ball and shanking them, and then suddenly your shots begin to straighten out. They begin to sail and go far down the fairway right in the middle. And you're like, I've always known what a good golf swing looked like and even how to try to do it, but now it's just happening. And that's a lot of what life's like. That's a lot of what emotional growth is like, where you keep banging your head against the wall over and over again. You keep doing the same thing over and over again, wrong, dead wrong. And eventually you make adjustments, and sometimes big things and tragedies and little things, and you realize that change is possible. Happiness maybe was never the goal. See, that's one of the great lies, is that happiness is attainable and maintainable, sustainable. Happiness is like a weather pattern, you know. You're a climate. You have your emotional climate that you were born with, perhaps, or what your kind of baseline state is. That's more true about you than whether or not you're happy. You can be happy, you can be sad, you can be angry, you can be afraid, or you can be joyful and deeply contented. They're way different. I would contend that it's easier to experience happiness when you're deeply contented and peaceful and joyful. But you're also totally in touch with your pain and your sadness and your grief and your loss. And you realize that those are tasty as well. Those are good things. There's truth in them. They inform you. They make the world richer, and they're not to be feared. That's what a heartache connoisseur is someone who tastes those things and isn't afraid to sip them and talk about them and swish them around in their mouth. All of the heartaches. And the happiness. It's just that after a while, happiness is like KoolAid, and you want something with richness and depth to it. And happiness is just, it's gummy bears. Easy for me to say, but I know that it's true. How do I know that it's true? Pattern recognition, looking inside myself, assimilating things that I've read with what I see, and coming to conclusions that in my mind are now indisputable. I mean, it's just the way it is. I mean, that's the thing that I think is hard when we're developing our philosophies about life. We read books, let's say we're sold out communists or sold out capitalists, and we've read all the theory and we like this one or we like that one. but we've never really experimented fully with those thought experiments have never really been alive in us. And perhaps even we like one or the other of those worldviews because it resonates with our own depth of brokenness or our own deepest places of despair, that they make the most sense to us because that's the way we think the world ought to be fixed, because of the way we're hurting. Well, what is true then? True is what is. And what is a progression of letting go and accepting life as it is on its own terms. That's what it is. And you realize after you watch people for a long time that the things that people are letting go and accepting are all the same things, pretty much for everybody, regardless of background, race, religion, creed, or otherwise. People are reconnoitering with their own issues around self-worth, their own feelings that they're not good enough, connecting the dots between the ways that I'm not good enough and my sense of entitlement, letting go of the need to be right, accepting less than perfect as a viable outcome and being okay with it. These are the processes that people go through, period. And it's good. It's okay. It's fun, actually, if you let it be. It's fun to grow. It's like a kid, learning to, be a great swimmer or a great baseball player or something. You start out and it's not as fun when you can't throw strikes. It's not as fun when you shank the golf balls off into the rough and you have to stop the whole game and look for your own stupid golf ball because you don't know what you're doing, but you can't admit it. And you got the nice shirt and you got the nice pants and you spent way more money than you should have on clubs because you're not even that good. That's such a great metaphor for life, So anyway, it's a hell of a lot more fun when you can hit them straight. All right, well, that feels like the end of that one. See you next time. The Heartache Connoisseur, Martin Carpenter. Thank you.